In this video, I'd like to give a brief overview of developmental theories of motor development, going back to a little bit of discussion of history, as well as the principles that continue to shape development, our views of motor development currently. So we're going to start by going back to the 1930s, which is really considered to be sort of the golden age of the study of motor development, when the classic debate of nature versus nurture was raging. And so when we talk about nature, we're talking about genetics and heredity, versus nurture, which is really environment and experiences. And on the nurture side, or excuse me, the nature side of the debate was a gentleman by the name of Arnold Gesell, and he pioneered what's known as the neural maturationist theory. And the neural maturationist theory, simply put, said that the brain was the driving force for development. And so Gesell and his colleagues really believed that development was pre-programmed, that every human baby born had a brain that was kind of wired up to behave in a certain way, and that as that brain developed, that then motor behavior and motor development would occur. So under this theory, motor development was driven by the central nervous system. Primitive reflexes were considered to be the building blocks of development. And because motor development was thought to occur in a very sort of linear, consistent, hierarchical sort of manner, motor milestones were thought to be the best way to assess and observe motor development. Now, on the other side of the spectrum was the nurture debate. And Skinner really pioneered what's known as the cognitive theory of development. And so the cognitive theory really believed that the primary influence on motor development was the environment. And so under this theory of development, motor behavior occurred through learning and also through reinforcement. And so, of course, the brain played a role in making the movement happen, but the brain was not thought to be what drove motor behavior. And so then to add to this debate was a researcher by the name of Myrtle Mcgraw. And Mcgraw did a very classic study on a set of twins named Jimmy and Johnny. And because Jimmy and Johnny were twins, Mcgraw thought that they had probably identical or nearly identical genetics. And so this was really a study to try to determine how much the environment could influence motor development. And so Johnny was the weaker of the two, and of the twins. And so what Myrtle Mcgraw did was she just left kind of Jimmy, the stronger of the twins, out here to grow and develop. But Johnny, she provided some extra unusual physical training. So lots of influence of the environment on Johnny. For example, she gave him roller skates when he was just 13 months old. And he did all kinds of climbing and jumping and, strength activities. So here he is with a little dumbbell. And so through all that extra training, Myrtle Mcgraw wanted to see if that had an influence on Johnny's development. And what she found was that when we looked at the basics, motor milestones in the first year of life, sitting, crawling, and walking, that all that extra physical training didn't really seem to have an impact, that Jimmy and Johnny essentially met those basic motor milestones at about the same time. And given sort of the attitudes of the time, that was considered to be sort of a win for the neural maturationist view. And so that was sort of chalked up as a win for that group, and at the end of the day, the debate sort of settled on the fact that nature, the brain, and the neural maturationist theory of development is what ruled in terms of motor development. Now, what the rest of the story is that Mcgraw also found that there did seem to be an influence of environment on development when you looked at Jimmy and Johnny later on in life. So Johnny seemed to do a little bit better in terms of strength and agility and coordination, even though those motor milestones didn't seem to be different. So although the history of motor development sort of puts the Mcgraw study and the Jimmy and Johnny study in the neuromaturationist camp, there's a lot of principles there that really clearly show that the environment may indeed have an impact on motor development, and certainly more than Gazelle believed at that time. And so at that point, the study of motor development sort of went dormant for a while. And a lot of what we currently use in physical therapy and in looking at developmental medicine in children continues to be based on that neuromaturationist theory, looking at reflexes and motor milestones. But a couple of decades later, a researcher by the name of Bernstein started to look at motor development a little bit differently. And what Bernstein thought was that motor development didn't really seem to be muscle specific, but rather was function or task specific. So for example, when you write your name, you can write your name with your right hand, you can write your name with your left hand, you can write your name on a piece of paper, you can write your name with a piece of chalk on the chalkboard, you can take a stick and write your name in the sand. So even though the task is the same and the outcome is the same, the muscle activation pattern is really very, very different. And so Bernstein looked at this and said, I don't know if I'm buying the fact that all muscle or all motor development comes from a command from the brain that tells muscles to work, because a lot of movement actually looks like it's function specific. It's not necessarily muscle specific. And so then that was taken a step further, and the current theory that we use today that really shapes motor development today is dynamical systems theory. And dynamical systems theory in motor development was pioneered by a researcher named Esther Thalin. And so Thalin took Bernstein's work and saw that, yes, indeed, even sometimes the same motor task could be done in a variety of ways. And it didn't really seem that everything was always done in this predictable, linear, hierarchical manner. And through her work on infants, looking at infant kicking and infant walking, infant stepping, she determined that it wasn't just the brain that was influencing development, and it wasn't just the environment that was influencing development, but that rather that development was influenced by a complex bidirectional interaction between the brain and the body and the environment. And so all these forces are constantly working together in a complex, ordered way in order to produce movement. So again, going back to the example of walking and stepping, we know that reflexive newborn stepping may be inborn. It may be genetically pre-programmed in circuits in the spinal cord. But development of walking depends on biomechanics, muscle tone, physical growth, energy level, and motivation, and also the environment. Is it a level surface? Is it uphill or downhill? Is it a grassy surface or a carpet? All of those things influence how that movement, walking and stepping, develops. So through all of this work, we've now learned that development isn't just about nature, and it isn't just about nurture. It's not just about the brain. It's not just about the body. It's not just about the environment. It really, truly is a complex interaction between the brain, the body, and the environment.